Well, there's no signs or anything. So when you're going in there, you expect, I'm just going to order dozens and dozens of donuts. This is not a problem, right? Whether you pick your flavors, you have them mix it. So we thought, whatever, if we want 6 dozen donuts, we want 6 dozen donuts. How would that be a problem? All you should have is donuts. It's not the same. They don't make them there. It's like they're shipped in and they're very limited supply. And, I mean, I think after the 8th order, the guy started getting pretty mad. So didn't help that we then had a subsequent order of many, many different kinds of coffee beverages. Steve Wonder here from GetRubix.com. And in light of everything that's been going on, the CrowdStrike issue, and people needed to recover their stuff, the subject of Bitlocker keys has come up. A lot of folks have exported their Bitlocker keys to a master spreadsheet in order to get into them. And look, that's fine. We got to do what we got to do when stuff hits the fan. But now that that's over, we're going to talk about rotating Bitlocker keys and what that means. And then we're going to look at a solution that will automatically rotate keys for you every 30 days. So check it out. Well, I think he was also mad because we were paying with many different gift cards. We might have to try a different Dunkin after this one.
Get Rubix, solving for the modern workplace.
Okay, so a few things about Bitlocker keys that we're going to go over today. Let's open up the old notepad here. Okay, first thing we're going to go over is how to rotate a Bitlocker key. Look how professional this looks. The second thing we're going to look at is interacting with Bitlocker keys in Graph API. And then finally, we're going to create a runbook with remediation to rotate keys every 30 days automatically, so you don't have to. So that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and open up Intune. We'll go to devices. One of the first things I want to show you though is where the setting is. So if you go to configuration, if we look at our Bitlocker policy, which would be an endpoint protection policy, mine is called M365 Bitlocker. Let's crack those settings open. So when we look here in these settings, you're going to see client-driven recovery password rotation. Now, this basically allows the Bitlocker key to be rotated, and this could be disabled, it could be enabled for intra-join and enabled for intra-hybrid join devices. The not configured setting means it's enabled by default, so if you haven't touched it, it's okay. Unless that setting is disabled or there's some policy messing with it, it should be able to be rotated. When we look at how to actually rotate a key, let's say we go to devices, Windows, let's go take a look at a device here, and we're going to go to recovery keys. I have several keys, probably because I migrated this device a few times and rolled it, but the bottom line is there's the key ID, there's the key, and what you can do is an overview. If you want to rotate the key, you look for the ellipsis all the way on the right, and you can hit Bitlocker key rotation. If you rotate the encryption keys on this device, you'll remove all keys. A single key will be escrowed to your identity provider, so it's actually going to live in Entra ID after you restart the devices. If multiple recovery keys exist, old keys will be automatically deleted. So yeah, you can go ahead and rotate that. And that takes care of that for one device, because if you already gave someone their key and they have it, for example, you had to get in the device after some massive solution caused almost everything on Earth to, boot into recovery mode, then your keys are out there and you're going to want to rotate them. But that takes care of one device. What about all of them? So there are a lot of solutions online, and, I've seen folks put up PowerShell scripts on how to reset all your Bitlocker recovery keys, like how to do bulk rotation using the graph, and that's fine. What I want to take away from this, and we're going to do a few videos that talk about things, and honestly, I don't want to do too much debriefing or post-mortem on what happened with the CrowdStrike issue. I want to talk about things we can do proactively going forward to not just avoid something like this, but also just make the security posture better. So I've often gotten asked about Bitlocker key rotation. It's not something we looked at yet, but it seems like a good time. So let's take a look at what it looks like in the graph and how we can use that information to automatically change a key every 30 days. Okay, so I'm heading over to the Microsoft Graph Explorer. I always switch mine to beta. That's personal preference. So I'm going to go to information protection. So this is a different node than Intune, right? Information protection, Bitlocker, recovery keys. And let's run that query. Now, if you can't run it, you just got to click on modify permissions, and you can see there are two things you're going to need. There's basically a least privilege, like a light version, and then the full Bitlocker recovery key read all. There's no action you would take here for it, so that's why it's read all. And let's look at some of this data. So basically, very, very simple. You have the ID of a key, right? You have the created date and time. That's going to be important. The type of volume it's protecting, right? OS or data drive. And then you have the device ID. So these essentially line up to device IDs in Entra. So I'm going to copy that ID. And we're going to go to entra.microsoft.com, and we're going to go to devices, all devices, and we're going to search that object, and there we go. So this device in Intune, we can click manage, and there we go. So for some reason, the Explorer showed multiple instances of this. It actually showed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means I have 5 different keys. Let's see what this says. It's true, I have 5 different keys, and this is going to get confusing. The latest one is backed up on May 31st. I have one from March 15th. All right, so I have a lot of keys, and this can happen for many different reasons. You know, kind of like I said before, but if you look at this, when we look at the key ID, that should match the ID here. So yeah, it does. Key ID 61663, 61663. Okay. So this is basically the key database that Intune looks at. So now the question is, you know, how can we rotate the keys with this information? Well, first thing we have to do is we have to look at the actual graph call. So there is a graph Intune rotate Bitlocker keys here. Rotate Bitlocker keys action. So this is an action in the device management node. So you can see you need device, these are the permissions you would need. Device management configuration, read write all, device management manage devices, read write all. Basically what we can do is if we know the ID of a device, so you can see this is the post call, beta device management manage devices, we put in the device, the Intune device ID, and we can just rotate the Bitlocker key. So we know we can do it through the graph. Question is, how are we going to evaluate based on their created date and time, older ones, and more importantly, how are we going to you know, make sure if we have a device ID, we're only getting the latest one. All right, so here's what we're going to do. All right, so we're going to start where we want to take a laptop, and we want to take the managed device. Actually, we need the device ID, the Entra device ID. So we have the Entra device ID, or actually, since they didn't change the name yet, Azure AD device ID. So you take that to a script, and you get the recovery key. Recovery key, right? And we do that through the graph call. Okay, so we get it using that call. Okay, so I'm going to check if the key is older than 30 days. Okay, so if the key is older than 30 days, I want to rotate the key. And if it's not older than 30 days, so if it's younger, we can simply just do nothing. And what we would have to do is this whole process, you know, I would say once a week, every other week, whatever you're comfortable with. But this is essentially what we want to do. So that's the logic I want to do. So basically what I want to do is I want all this here, this first part, which is just collecting the Entra device ID and sending it. I want that to be client side. And then for the second part, I want all this to run in an Azure runbook, so I don't have to keep any credentials locally. I just get the device once a week and send it up to the function. Super easy. So we're going to start by making a new folder, and we're going to call it auto rotate Bitlocker keys. Nice short name. Okay, and I need a few things in here. The first thing I need is my client script, which we are going to run as a remediation, just with no detection. So it's just gonna end successfully saying it ran. So we're going to call this client script.ps1. There we go. Okay. And then next we're going to call this we're going to use our webhook script. This is what we're going to put up in Azure in the runbook, and we're going to go through that again. So first thing we got to do is let's actually open this whole thing in code. All right, and let's start by looking at our client script. So our client script is very simple. The first thing we're going to do is get the device ID, and that's going to be the device we're sending this to. We're going to assemble the JSON payload, and then we're going to send payload to the webhook. So getting the device ID, well, we can get an Entra device ID of a device by its cert, right? So we can say the device ID is equal to get child item, path is cert. Oh. That's going to be cert local machine my, that's the personal store, where the object, we want the issuer to match MS organization access. That's the Entra ID. And then we want to select the object of subject, but we're going to have to trim that down. So we're going to do dot subject trim start cn equals. Okay, that'll get us the device ID, the Entra device ID. So now that we have the device ID right from the device, we just have to put it in JSON so that we can send it up. So payload equals code block. It's going to be device ID equals device ID. It's pretty simple. We'll convert that to JSON. Convert to JSON. Now sending the payload to the webhook. We don't have our webhook yet. We're gonna get to that in a minute. So it'll be a URL, and then we'll invoke web request. URI is the webhook itself. The method is post. And the body is the payload, and we'll just say use basic parsing. Use basic parsing. All right, so that's our client script. We got to come back once we have the webhook. So for the webhook script, we're going to do a few things. We're going to get the payload body. We're going to connect to the graph. Get the device recovery key, well, specifically the latest key, because that's how we're going to tell it how old it is. We're going to then get the Intune device ID, check if key is older than 30 days. If it is, rotate it. So that's the framework for what we're going to be doing. So let's get the payload body. Commandlet binding. This is like any function. We're going to have params. Okay, so the only parameter we're taking in is the payload itself. We'll call that webhook data. Okay. And if it exists, which it has to in order for this to work, we're going to parse it out. So we're going to say body data equals convert from JSON. So we're just going backwards. Input object is going to be the webhook data, and that's going to be the request body. And the only thing in there we want is the device ID. And we got a body data, device ID. We have to out that to a string and trim that. And that should give us just the ID, which is what we need. So now we connect to the graph, and when we're using the managed identity of the runbook, we just do connect mg graph identity, and we'll go over the permissions when we make this. Getting the recovery keys. So the recovery keys is invoke mg graph request. Now this is just how we did it in the graph when we went and looked up how to get those keys up here. When we did this one, this is the call we have to make. We just have to only select the device with the ID we're doing. So for example, if that's my device ID, we're going to filter that. So we're going to say filter device ID equals that. And we'll run the query. And now you can see we're only getting back, well, in this case, we got back 5 results, but it's still only that device ID. Okay, so invoke mf graph request. The method is get. The URI is that exact URI, graph.microsoft.com/beta/information protection /bitlocker/recovery keys. And of course, when we're in PowerShell and we do the $$ filter, we have to put the little tick. It's the shift tilde key next to the 1. And that filter, of course, is going to be device ID is equal to, and we're just going to pop in our device ID variable. And that'll give us the recovery keys. Now, of course, we're then going to have to, parse them out. Okay, so that's going to give us an object that needs to be cracked open. So what we want to do next is we want to crack it open, and we want to look at all these dates and basically pick the latest one. So the way we do that to only get that object is we're going to go down here, and we're going to have a variable called recovery key. And that is going to equal the recovery keys dot value. So again, we're breaking that open. And then we're going to do sort object by the property created date and time in a descending order. And then we're going to select the object, the first one. And that should give us the 1 key. And now we can just make a variable for created date time and get recovery key created date time. So that will just return this value for us. That's really all we care about. Cool. All right, so now that we have that, we got to get some of the Intune information for the device because we know the ID and that's how we're going to get it. So we're going to say the Intune device object, and we'll get the name too, just for reporting purposes. So we're going to do invoke mg graph request method get URI https graph.microsoft.com/beta/device management /manage devices. Another filter. It's a question tick $ filter equals. Now we're looking, we have the device ID, so that's all we need. And of course, let's actually just go back a second. I can show you. I'll show you a different call here. If we go device management, manage devices, the actual ID is still known as either the Azure Active Directory device ID or the Azure AD device ID. No entry yet, so that's what we're going to take. So we're going to say filter where the Azure AD device ID equals our device ID. And we're going to say .value, because that's going to open it up. And from there, we're going to say the Intune ID is Intune device object .id, and the Intune name is the Intune device object device name, because that should give us the friendly name of the device. Here we go. Device type, no. ID. Where is the thing? Yeah, device name right there. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to check if it's the key, if that created key date time is older than 30 days. So how do we know what's older than 30 days now? Well, for that, we're going to call this the cutoff date. And we're going to do a get date. And we're going to add -30 to it. Add days, actually. So basically, that means the cutoff date is today minus 30 days. So if we were to just run this, and if I go down here and call cutoff date, Saturday, June 22nd, 2024. Okay, because today's July 22nd. Perfect. So we're going to write some output, and we're going to say checking Intune name, that'll be the device. So checking device for key rotation. And then we'll say if the created date is less than the cutoff date, so if it's, not more than 30 days, we're going to write output. We're going to say recovery key for Intune name was updated within the last 30 days. No need to rotate. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Else, we're going to say write output. Recovery key for Intune name was not updated within the last 30 days, attempting to rotate. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this in a try catch. So we're going to try to invoke the mggraph request, and that's going to be the method of post, because we're going to post an action. The URI is https graph.microsoft.com beta device management. And this is the Intune call we looked at. Managed devices. We're going to put in our Intune ID, and we're going to say rotate Bitlocker keys. Okay. And then what we'll say is write output successfully rotated key for Intune name. And the catch, we're just going to grab whatever the error is. So we're going to take the message, and that'll be the exception.message. And we're going to write output failed to rotate key for Intune name. And we'll just post the error message there. Okay. Yeah, there we go. All right, so in portal.azure.com, we need an automation account. Now, I do have one already, but because we're starting from scratch, I'm going to walk you through it from scratch. So if you see automation accounts, you can click that. If not, search for it. You're going to see automation accounts. So you go to those services, and we are going to create one. You do need an Azure subscription for this. So you choose your subscription. I am going to make a resource group, or do I have one? I'm going to make a new resource group. I'm going to call this MVP RSG rotate automation. You can call it whatever you want, doesn't really matter. And my automation account name is going to be Bitlocker rotation. Oh, can't have spaces. Can I have an underscore? Yes. I can have a dash. Bitlocker rotation. System assigned, user assigned. You're going to want to leave this system assigned because this automation account is essentially an identity. We want public access. That's fine. We're going to review and create it. All right, so you're going to wait for that to deploy. We're going to go to the resource. Okay, so with the automation account created, there's some options we want to look at. And the first one is going to be the accounts, right? So with the account settings, you're going to go to identity, and you now have an object principal. This is your managed identity. So when you go to Entra Enterprise Applications and change the type to managed identities, you're going to see your object, Bitlocker rotation. Now, permissioning these is a little bit different. I'm going to put the link. There's a script written by Mr. T-Bone that we looked at last time that basically you run the script and it's how you permission the managed identity with what you want, right? So you're going to run that script. Basically what you do, so you edit your tenant ID and the name of your managed identity, and you're going to put the permissions in that you want. In our case, it's the device management, managed devices, device management configuration, read, write, all. There's one more permission, but it's delegated, so we can't add it here. So when you run this, you're going to be asked to authenticate, and then once you click OK and sign in, we can go back to permissions, and you're going to see they were added here for you because there's no place to click and add. All right. The other thing you have to do after that is click on modules. All right. We're going to need the module for this account to be the graph module to authenticate. So we're going to hit add module, browse from gallery, and click here to browse from gallery. Okay. And we're looking for Microsoft Graph, and it should be the first one. Microsoft Graph Authentication. That's exactly what we want. So we want to select this, and we want to go ahead, and the runtime version, we'll leave it at recommended, and hit import. And once that's there, we're going to wait until it is available to us, and we'll know because we can change this to custom, and we can see it's importing. Just wait till that's done. Okay, and it is now available, so we are good to go there. So what we're going to do is now under the process automation, we're going to hit runbooks. So these are all the runbooks associated with this automation account, and we are going to create a new one. So we're going to call ours Bitlocker rotation. The runbook type is PowerShell, and the runtime version is recommended. Good, good, good. And now we have a runbook. We can add stuff to it. We're going to click on it, make sure we hit add to canvas. And this is the runbook. So we can just take our, basically we can take all this, right? And we can go ahead and paste that in. The only thing we're going to have to add is on line 14 after identity, we're going to want to add scopes, Bitlocker Key, read, all. Because again, that was not a permission we could add in the identity, so we got to add it here as delegated. All right, everything else should be good. We're going to hit save, and we're going to publish that. Now that it's published, we can click on webhooks and add a webhook for ourselves. We're going to create a new one, call it Bitlocker rotation. Just keep it all kind of similar. This is your only shot to grab that, so make sure you do that. Parameters and run settings, you can leave that blank. We'll just hit create. So now that we have our webhook, we're going to go back to our client script and paste it in the webhook variable between quotes. All right, so let's test this out. I am going to launch command prompt. I'm going to kind of simulate Intune here just to test the client side one. opening a command as system, and I'm going to navigate to where I've stored the, oh, that's no good. Navigate to where I stored the script, and we're going to say PowerShell, exe, execution, policy, bypass, client scripts. All right, the job finished. So now if I go back to here, we can click on jobs and we should see a job queued, and it is. So we're just going to wait. Basically, we've taken the device ID, we've posted that up to sent it to the webhook. So it got received. That means there's a job queued and the job is starting, and we'll see what happens. Now, while we wait for that, we should be able to look up that device I was just on, 5388. And when I look at the latest recovery key, it was backed up just a few weeks ago. So the script should not attempt to rotate the key. So we're going to keep an eye on that. All right, so when we look at the job, we can see the input was the device ID, our output, checking Z0T, yep, it was updated within the last 30 days. There's no need to rotate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Intune, and I'm going to go to Devices, Scripts and Remediations, and I'm going to create this one, and I'm going to say auto rotate. Oh, you got to be able to spell. We've talked about this. Bitlocker keys every 30 days. So we're going to use our auto rotate, our client script as detect. Actually, we do need to modify that a little bit because it's not going to exit out the right way. So that's my bad. Okay, so basically what we'll do is we'll say if payload then we're gonna say write output device ID sent to webhook for evaluation, and we'll exit 0. That should be good enough. Let's go back and re-upload that. Yeah, perfect. And there's no remediate file. By default, we'll run once devices every day. We're going to leave those to no and do 64-bit. We are going to schedule this to, we're going to do all devices. Let's do a filter for Windows devices. Include the filter corporate devices. And we're going to set that up for frequency daily, repeats every 7 days. So there's quite a bit going on here. I'm going to post this all on GitHub so you have it. I'm also going to include the Mr. T-Bone script up there so you can use that to update your the permissions for your managed identity. I did a previous video on this too, so if you want to see that, you can check it out. But hopefully this gives us a way to be proactive and say, you know what, let's make sure we're rotating our keys every 30 days. So in the event we have to use them, we have to give them out. We know we have some kind of fail-safe here, and we'll be good to go. And at the very least, if you don't rotate them, you'll be able to see when they were rotated based on that. So let me know what you think about this, suggestions, hop in the Discord, and we'll be seeing you.